So what about what God's saying to this nation? In this passage here, he says, the Athenians, the times of ignorance God overlooked. They didn't know any better. Paul was now telling them something new about the gospel. Will he say the same to this nation? We're not living in times of ignorance. Knowledge of the truth has arrived. This country of Great Britain, we've had the message of the gospel influencing our society for centuries. We've had easy access to the Bible. We have a history of Christian influence. 1860, there was a census which discovered that 60% of people went to church. Not that they were nominally Christian, they were attending church. Around 60% of children went to Sunday schools, where they heard the basics of the Christian message. Also got some kind of education as well. The gospel was preached from these islands around the world. Christianity influencing people right from China to Africa and around the world, many of them coming out from this country. So we had revivals of Christianity, especially under Wesley, causing a mass movement of people towards Christ. And we exported this message around the world through the missionary movement, the translation of the Bible into languages of the nations, much of which originated from these islands. And although others were involved, Britain played a forefront in the process of world evangelism in the 19th century. But now we junked it. We've thrown it all out. We brought in other gods. We've got anti-Christian influences, glorified sexual immorality, taught our children to be homosexual and transsexual, mocked and disregarded the Bible and abandoned our Christian heritage, even treating it as something to be ashamed of. They're now suppressing authentic Christianity, even hounding preachers of the gospel, giving preference to Islam over Christianity, practicing yoga, New Age spirituality, instead of seeking God through Jesus Christ. And all of our institutions are infiltrated by kind of cultural Marxism and woke ideology, as a result of which we see a society that's falling apart, with divisions over race, religion, crime waves, drugs, shoplifting, violence, and so on. See our youth very much demoralized, many out of work with no hope for the future. We see hopeless politicians and religious leaders who are actually leading us further into the abyss and generally clueless about the reason for what's gone wrong with our society. Facing a growing economic crisis in which the coming days risk tipping us over the edge into either chaos or a new kind of dictatorship backed by high-tech control. Do you see these things happening? Or am I exaggerating? We can see it's happening all around us, can't we? What's happening now also that if you criticize this process, if you criticize what we call wokery, diversity policy, you risk being classed as a hate crime, with a growing authoritarian society monitoring social media, communications like this, in ways which risks shutting down free speech. There's a Christian teacher called Enoch Burke who's currently in prison in Dublin after he was suspended from his job and jailed for refusing to teach transgenderism in the school. A Christian police support officer was suspended after he asked questions about Islam in a diversity training session. Luke Salmons lost his job as a police community officer with North Yorkshire Force and was barred from policing after a conversation about Gaza with a Muslim officer. He said a culture of fear existed among officers who were terrified of being fired for saying the wrong thing. Mr. Salmons told The Telegraph that the training day on race, religion and culture turned into an indoctrination session as trainers chanted Islam is a religion of peace and discussed white privilege. Having been encouraged to ask questions in what staff were told was a safe space, he asked a Muslim officer about his views on terrorist attacks by Islamist groups, including Hamas. The officer actually was happy to discuss this issue with him and even invited him for a chat over coffee after the session. But 2 days later, he was summoned by the chief and suspended for gross misconduct by an inspector who said, "I don't like your beliefs." In other words, Christian expressing just asking a question about Islam, lost his job because they didn't like his beliefs. That's happening in Britain today. not in Afghanistan, not in Pakistan, but in Britain. And you can see that we have a culture which is going right against Christianity. See, that identity and race has become a big issue. You have diversity training to enforce anti-racism. Perhaps I'm on slightly difficult ground here, but I am totally anti-racist. I believe that we're all created in the image of God. But when I look at the anti-racist movement, I'm anti that as well, because it's become infiltrated and taken over by forces which are anti-Christian and not working in the benefit of racial minorities, and certainly not working in the benefit of the indigenous peoples of these islands. Interestingly, Paul mentions in this passage, God made people from one blood, every race, every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth. In other words, there's one race, the human race, and all are valued in the eyes of God. All are tainted with the same problem of sin as well, and all are offered the possibility of redemption through the blood of Jesus. There's a good basis there for a Christian view on race relations. We're all equal in the sight of God. 1963, civil rights leader Martin Luther King gave his famous speech declaring, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Absolutely, I agree with that. It was a statement from Martin Luther King, one of the champions of black liberation from oppression in America, and he expressed a legitimate desire for a society free of racial prejudice, which all people have equal opportunity to participate and thrive. I totally subscribe to that view. However, the principled anti-racism of the likes of Martin Luther King, which was based on a Christian view of the equality of all people before God, has morphed into a sinister campaign backed by the extreme left, guilt-ridden white liberals and Islamists that target biblical Christians and Jews, as creating a kind of reverse anti-white racism, which came out in the recent case with this lad Henry, who was so badly treated by the police. And all of this actually increases racial division, breeding resentment among white Britons who accuse the authorities of two-tier policing. They perceive they're not getting a fair deal in society and becoming second-class citizens in their own country. As a result, we have more division and the rise of movements on the far right and the far left, which really are a danger to social cohesion. And our leaders miss the point of what's going wrong. Frankly, this government is incompetent, self-serving. Our education system has become more of an indoctrination process than a learning one. I say that as an ex-teacher. Our media is biased, especially the BBC. Our church leaders spend more time speaking politically correct cliches than gospel truth. It can be summed up in the word from Jeremiah, "For my people have committed 2 evils. They've forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewn themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water."